If I could ask everybody to have their seats. Before we start the meeting this morning, I'd like just to take a moment and introduce our interns for the summer who are back there with us right now, who come in and work on various items for us. Abby Bricka. Abby, you stand up, please. Abby's from a senior at Notre Dame University from Peoria, and she's been very involved with working with our auditors and our budgets and so on. Alex Hovland. Alex, University of Illinois graduate, is at Illinois State working on his MBA. And also Veer Gulia. Veer's from Illinois Wesleyan, and he's from Calcutta, India. And thank you for joining us and the work that you do. And they help us with the budget. They help us do whatever we tell them to do. So thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us for the summer. And so welcome again. Before we start the meeting this morning, I have a notice. It was published in the Pantograph, posted online and at the entrances to the building, indicating the intent of the McLean County Board to conduct a public hearing with regards to the Illinois Department of Transportation 2018 Consolidated Vehicle Procurement Rolling Stock Capital Assistance Grant application for vehicles, and I hereby declare the public hearing open. Are there any interested persons or agencies to be heard with respect to the proposal for the McLean County Highway Department for show bus for rural transportation for McLean, Livingston, Iroquois, Ford, DeWitt, and Macon counties? I'll ask again, are there any interested persons or agencies wishing to be heard on this matter at this time? Third request, I ask a third time, are there any interested persons or agencies wishing to be heard on this matter at this time? Okay, this concludes the public hearing on the IDOT 2018 Consolidated Vehicle Procurement Rolling Stock Capital Assistance Grant application for vehicles. Thank you. Put this away for now. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the McLean County Board regular meeting Tuesday, June 19th, 2018 to order. The invocation, please rise, will be by Member Metzger.
Lord God, thank you for granting us this opportunity to oversee the operations of this county. We trust in your wisdom as we seek to work hard to make it secure and prosperous. May good practice be the cornerstone of everything we do. Come, reveal new opportunities and areas of expansion and development. Bless our place of work and give us wisdom and calm. Let this board be of great service to others, prospering through decency, honesty, and respect for our employees and our citizens. May we be strong, courageous, making wise decisions guided by the Holy Spirit and not be afraid or discouraged. May this county grow and flourish, creating a great opportunity and provisions for all. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
The County Clerk, please call the roll.
Randall Martin. Randall Martin. Absent. Catherine Metzger.
Present.
Scott Murphy. Absent. Eric Rankin. Absent. Carla Robustelli. Susan Schaefer.
Here.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Here.
Paul Segobiano.
Here.
David Seltzer.
Here.
James Solner.
Here.
George Wendt. Lori Wolrab. Absent. Josh Barnett.
Present.
Jacob Beard.
Present.
William Casely.
Present.
Don Cavallini.
Here.
Chuck Erickson.
Here.
George Gordon.
Present.
Mark Johnson.
Here.
John McIntyre.
Here, I think we have 16 members present and 4 absent, and we do have a quorum. There are no members of the public or county employees appearing to speak this morning. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'd like to call your attention to item E2A. And if you'll turn to the second page on that, under the Finance Committee, that is a letter of advisory from our auditors, and they have not yet filed that letter as scheduled at the time the packet was put together. So please remove item E2A. We won't deal with that as well. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move be approved as amended.
Motion to approve as amended. Member Catherine Metzger?
Yeah.
Member Metzger, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman McIntyre. I would like to remove from the consent agenda item C1A, the approval of the request for the Hayward Solar Farm.
Motion to request to remove item C1A, that will go under building and zoning with our land use report. Any other comments? I do have a motion to approve then as amended. Is there a second? Second by Member Johnson. All in favor of approve the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, you got. We'll move on to a report of our standing committees, Executive Committee Vice Chairman Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Committee has 2 items to present today. First one is 7A, 1A, request to approve of an amendment to the employment agreement between McLean County and the county administrator. Documents have been distributed, and I so move.
Motion by Member Solner, second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Second item is 7A, 1B, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance, General Fund 0001, County Board 0001, to DOG grant, requires a 2/3 vote, and I so move.
Motion by Vice Chairman Solner, second by Member Cavallini. Comments or questions? This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there anyone whose dissenting vote wants to be recorded? If none, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all the Executive Committee has for action today. There are numerous other reports, Airport Authority, Water Reclamation, Township Public Water. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to Transportation Committee Chairman Casely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no items for action today, and our general report can be found on pages 30 to 33 of the as yet unapproved minutes.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to Property Committee Chairman Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Property Committee brings no items for action this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to Justice Committee Chairman Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings 4 items for action to the board this morning. Item D1A, request approval for an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance, General Fund 0001, Circuit Clerk 0015. This requires a 2/3 vote, found on pages 86 through 88, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon, second by Member Casely. Comments or questions? This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Are there any dissenting votes? If none, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item D1B, request approval of an intergovernmental grant agreement between the State of Illinois, Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and the County of McLean, found on pages 89 through 121, and I'll move that.
Motion by Member Gordon, second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
Item D1C, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for the General Fund 0001, Sheriff's Department 0029, EMA Operations 0052 for an additional grant. This also requires a two-thirds vote, found on pages 122 through 124, and I'll move that.
Motion by Member Gordon, second by Member Cavallini. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Any dissenting votes? Motion carries unanimously.
Item D1D, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance, amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance in the coroner's office, found on pages 125 through 127, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? This is a two-thirds vote requirement. Are there any dissenting votes? If none, the motion carries unanimously.
Our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes found on pages 10 through 16, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll go on to the Finance Committee. Chair, Member Selzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item we bring for action is request approval on an acceptance agreement and addendum with the Illinois State Board of Elections voter registration for a 2018 state grant, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Kaisley. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
This next item, as you'll remember, was sent back to Finance for review, which was well attended by many members of the board and brought back again now for action, and that is request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the circuit clerk, auditor, and coroner, and I would move that.
Motion by Member Selzer. Is there a second? Second by Member Segoviano. Comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please say aye. I'm sorry. There's a request for a roll call vote. Clerk, please call the roll. Chairman will vote.
Catherine Metzger.
Yes.
Eric Rankin.
No.
Carla Robustelli. I'm sorry.
No.
Susan Schaefer.
Yes.
Ryan Scritchlow.
No.
Paul Segoviano.
Yes.
David Seltzer.
Yes.
James Holdner.
Yes.
George Wendt.
No.
Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard.
No.
William Kaisley.
No.
Don Cavallini.
No.
Chuck Erickson.
No.
George Gordon.
No.
Mark Johnson.
No.
John McIntyre.
Yes.
7 yes. 10 no.
There are 7 yeses. I'm sorry. All right, there's 7 yeses, 10 noes. The motion is defeated. So we will move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item we bring for action is a request to accept and place on file the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR, for fiscal year December 31st, 2017, and I would move.
Motion by Member Selzer, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
The next item that we bring is request to accept and place on file the Popular Annual Financial Report, or the PAFR, December 31st, 2017, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Kaisley. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. The PAFR is only done in a few counties, and it's very widely used by a lot of people in our county, and I would just like to point out how the great amount of work that goes into that, and the CAFR, both of those documents, but the PAFR is one that is used extensively throughout the county, and I'd like to just thank the Auditor's Office for putting that together.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments, discussion at this time? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
The next item we bring is request approval of an ordinance for prevailing rate of public works wages for McLean County, and I would move that.
A motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Gordon. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, I'm sorry, 1 no? Okay. Motion has carried.
We have no other items. I'd be happy to answer any questions people may have.
Thank you. I will move on to the Health Committee. Chair Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee has no items for action today, and our general report can be found on pages 25 through 29 of the unapproved minutes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to Land Use and Development Committee. Chair Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee brings one item for action. That was the item removed from the consent agenda, which is item 6C1A, approve the request of Hayworth Solar LLC by Geronimo Energy in case SU-18-11 on parcel 34-07-400-004. It is requesting a special use to allow a solar-powered generating facility in the agriculture district on land in Funks Grove Township, immediately southwest of the intersection of 50 North Road and 700 East Road, Perrins County Highway 45. Mr. Chairman, I do support this, so I will not be moving it.
Is there a motion to accept? Motion by Member Selzer, second by Member Johnson. Comments, questions, or discussion? Member Metzger.
McLean County is home, as we know, to the best farm ground in the world, and the proposed site is one of the better fields in the county. This is a pivotal precedence. Allowing a solar farm on prime land will escalate the destruction of other farm ground in the county. Farmland in McLean County is in high demand as cropland, and taking this land out of production reduces the supply of farmland and increases the competition for other farmers in the area. This will artificially drive up the cash rent prices of other farms. And this, as we know, is not a free market venue. The highest and best use of this land is for crops. And the only reason that this solar farm can outbid crop production is because of the huge subsidies given to solar projects. Without these subsidies, the solar farm would not be able to make money. And that creates two problems. First, it's unfair competition for the farmland, and second, the viability of a solar farm is 100% dependent upon these subsidies. But more important, I think it was the fact that the application was inadequate. This application had serious omissions. The decommissioning plan was totally inadequate. It was recognized as inadequate by the ZBA, but it went forward. In addition, the project did not, they failed to contact the road commissioner and discuss the problems with their entrance. And I have visited that site, and I totally understand the concerns of this road commissioner. The road is not wide enough and will not support this construction, the construction as well as the post-construction traffic. This land, the soil site value is 94.9, and the Lisa value is 266.9 out of 300. Some of the best, again, farm ground in the country. To imply that cover crops would be a good substitute would only, the cover crops are only good if they're maintained well. Otherwise, they could be a potential high fire hazard. Now, in addition, their safety plan that's found in the application is totally incomplete. There were names and phone numbers for company representatives were missing. The primary and secondary hospitals and urgent care facilities were blank. So what I am asking, and I urge my board members not to approve this project until the application is adequate and totally complete. The decommissioning plan must be more than one page, and it has to have some kind of financial stability in escrow, and that isn't there. So I believe that we should not approve this until they resubmit it to the zoning board and all of these pieces are available for people to review.
Member Metzger, do you have a substitute motion or any other motion you'd like to make?
I think that was my motion, was that we send it back until they redo their application, until they have all the pieces that are missing. The missing pieces are in their application, and it is reviewed again by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
I wanted to clarify and make sure as a point of information that your motion is to send this back to Zoning Board with your recommendations as stated. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Member Wendt. Other further comments or discussion? We're now on the substitute motion. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a firm believer that how you get to the result is just as important as the result. I mean, the process has to be sacred. And if what she said is accurate, then it should be sent back. I don't have enough knowledge to know whether it's accurate or not at this point. So, you know, once again, I mean, how you get to the result is just important as the result. I do support private property rights, except when I think that when you're exercising your private property rights, you're being injurious to your neighbors. And when that occurs, then I think that there has to be a balancing approach. We have to find the right balance between your private property rights and the rights of the neighbors. With that said, since I don't know, unless I get some indication that what she said was inaccurate, I'm going to be voting in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw some other hands up. I think Mr. Barrett is next. Thank you.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, either for our state's attorney or for our administration. By sending it back, does that prevent the applicant from them resubmitting a new application as soon as they're able to?
No, it wouldn't be, they wouldn't have to submit a new one. The ZBA would just further consider based upon Ms. Metzger's concerns.
Okay, so they would be able to update their existing application to potentially address the concerns mentioned here today.
I believe that's what the substitute motion is, to further complete. Is that correct, Member Metzger? Okay, thank you. Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions. Mrs. Metzger brought up a lot of objection to this, and there was an extensive public hearing on that. And I guess my question to her, did she voice those during the public hearing at all?
Would you like to respond to that question?
I don't believe that as a board member I should voice those concerns. I did attend the meeting. I was the only board member there.
Okay, thank you.
Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I think we'll find on page 60, we appointed this board to hear these cases, and they went through each criteria that is required by the zoning board, and it came out a unanimous vote, 6-0. So we appointed them, they heard the case, they voted 6-0 in favor of it. I'm going to vote against the substitute motion.
Okay, thank you. Member Rostelli, your light's on, so I assumed you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there were two parts of the objection that came forward, and I want to just respond to both parts. The first part was the subsidies that are provided for alternative energy generation. And the second part was Member Metzger's characterization as us getting an incomplete application. And on the former, I just want to remind everyone that the Farm Bill is also a pretty big subsidy. So it's not like corn and soybeans are not subsidized. In fact, there's no comparison between the subsidies between growing corn and soybeans and alternative energy. And I'm compelled personally by providing farmers choices in terms of allowing them to diversify what they harvest. In this case, they're harvesting the sun. And I think given the challenges that farmers face out in over the years with weather and all the different conditions they have to address, this is a nice and sustainable revenue source for them. And so I think in terms of options, I feel that it makes sense to me that farmers would think about diversifying what kinds of things they're harvesting. On the second concern, this is this is just new territory for me. I'm a little surprised that we would get something that went through the special use permit process, presumably has gone through our civil state's attorney's office, and be incomplete. And so I'm just wondering how we could have an incomplete proposal at this point. And I want to get a sense of the administrator's office or the state's attorney's office as to whether or not just affirmation that they have reviewed this application, they have reviewed the materials, that the process, the special permitting process was followed, and that we do in fact have, to the best of your knowledge, a complete proposal and application before us.
Ms. Wally from our office does review those applications, as does Phil Dick from the Building and Zoning. As far as the state's attorney's office's role in that process, though, it's not our role to say whether their application is right or wrong or anything like that. That would be up to the ZBA to review, since they're the ones passing it or turning it down and having the hearing on it. So from what Ms. Wally has represented to me, there was a full hearing on the application, and as far as procedurally, she did not express any concerns to me about how that went.
And I guess then for the administrator, since this department falls directly under you, is it based on what you have seen, do we have a complete application like we've had before us? Are we considering, are there issues with this application? Are you concerned about what is not included in this application? I mean, there have been allegations that there are missing pieces, things are not included, and I want to get a sense of how we would have an application before us with that level of omission.
First, with the leave of the chairman and the board, I'll respond. We were not advised of these concerns until this meeting. Mr. Dick is present at the meeting today. He was present during the hearing process and review. With the leave of the chairman and the board, I would recommend that he could provide feedback relative to your question.
Are there any objections of Mr. Dick coming to the podium? Member Sullivan.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I'm objecting to it, but I just, after the last couple of meetings, I feel like we end up doing committee work at the board, and I would just caution us not to try to make this a committee meeting. Either we want to send it back for further review or we don't.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dick, would you please come to the podium? Were you able to hear the question all right, or would you like to have it restated?
Is the question whether the application complete?
Is that correct, Member Robustelli? Yes. Thank you.
We have this is the fifth special use application for a solar farm that we've received, and we did not necessarily agree that everything was adequate as far as the special use application is concerned, and that's why, as part of our staff report, and I think the zoning board found as well, that it needed to have some stipulations that make it more complete. With respect to reclamation, the zoning board and the staff recommended a more complete reclamation plan than was submitted, and it is consistent with the other four that have been approved, and it is somewhat consistent with what the wind farms have been approved with. So in answer to the question of whether it's complete, with respect to some of the blanks in terms of who they call in case of an emergency, the emergency call in case there's an accident at the plant. Their explanation is that when the application for the permit will be applied for, they will submit that information. That isn't necessary at this point, they didn't think, and I tend to agree with that. But in terms of whether the application is complete, I found it to be so.
Thank you. Are there further questions of Mr. Dick?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wendt.
On this decommissioning, you said that it wasn't adequate. Now, if we let them go ahead with this without having that in front of us, how do we know they're going to come up with a decommissioning process that is adequate? And the second thing is, as we've found out,
Doesn't this move outside the scope of a quasi-judicial hearing coming through the ZBA? I mean, we're getting into testimony area.
That's correct. I do have a concern about testimony being provided at the board. The decision has to be made solely based on the testimony provided at the public hearing.
We all understand that, so let's rule that out of order at this time.
I'll just make one comment.
Would you keep your comment to Mr. Dick specifically? No. Could you have a question? All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions of Mr. Dick at this time? Member Solner?
I'm sorry, my comment isn't to Mr. Dick.
All right, thank you. Any other further questions of Mr. Dick? Okay, thank you, sir, for coming to the podium. We'll move on to the discussion, and next would be Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did not have an opportunity to review the proposal in the Office of the Department of Building and Zoning prior to the ZBA hearing. I am interested in knowing, my questions are directed to Member Metzger. On page 46 in our packet, under the, in the listing of stipulations, which were insisted upon by the ZBA directed to the applicant, in number 5, the applicant needs to submit a decommissioning plan certifying proposed decommissioning costs. I believe Member Metzger can answer this question. Are proposed decommissioning costs stipulated, identified, specified in the decommissioning plan that apparently has been submitted since the ZBA hearing?
I am looking at it, and the answer is no.
And my second question, thank you. My second question has to do with the very next item, number 6, a contact person for the applicant will need to be kept on file. Has that been, has the name and contact information for any such person also been included in what you have before you?
I believe the contact person for the company is there. My concern is their safety information is totally blank. Their safety plan, specific site safety plan, has all the information, contact information is blank, as well as multiple other things.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're still in round 1 here. Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple comments. The first one, I guess, we've been through time and time again, and that's over the landowner's rights. I believe it's of utmost importance that farmers have an opportunity to increase their income if they can. And again, I agree with Member Erickson that they can impinge on neighboring rights, but in the case of a solar farm, I don't believe that does impinge on the neighboring rights other than the discussion about possibility of raising cash rents and that type of thing. Again, I believe a farmer needs to have an opportunity to increase his income if he can. The other question, or the other comment I have is, again, after the staff report, there are those number of stipulations. Number 1 is an entrance permit and road use agreement is obtained from the road authority. And from what I understand is that they won't be issued building permits. Even though we may approve this, they won't be issued building permits until these stipulations are met. I would like, with the board's approval or consent, I'd like to ask Highway Engineer Jerry Stokes if he would comment on what's going on with the road use agreement.
Are there any objections of Mr. Stokes coming to the podium? If none, would you please join us, Mr. Stokes?
So from what I understand, the ZBA had recommended that a road use agreement be put in place before the building permits. And so the applicant reached out to us last week, and I've had a conversation with the Funks Grove Road Commissioner in regards to this. And we are actually meeting directly after the county board meeting to discuss the road use agreement.
And again, it's my understanding that although we may approve this permit, this application, that no building will commence until these stipulations are completed.
That's my understanding as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions of Mr. Stokes? Member Salzer.
Not of Mr. Stokes.
Not Mr. Stokes. Oh, thank you, sir. We're still on the first round of discussion. Member Salzer.
I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I believe it's like the preamble to our zoning code or the beginning of the opening of our zoning specifically spells out and tells us to protect farm ground for agriculture, crop production, traditional farm ground at all costs. My record's clear. I've voted for every wind farm and solar farm that's come before this, and I see no reason why I wouldn't do this with one exception. I don't understand how the zoning board can say a standard is met when the soil score is 94.9 and that the LISA score is 266.9. I don't know how you can say you met the standard. So that is why I will support this going back to get additional information. There is plenty of farm ground in this community or open ground that is not necessarily tillable and would have low LISA scores and would be great locations. So again, I support landowners' rights. I don't know where I'll come down on this, but I do support this going back for additional study. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Schaefer.
I also support going back because granted there's a lot of these stipulations that they said have to be done before the permits are issued. Many of these things are actually in the code, I believe, in our zoning code. So why was some of this information not included in the application and as Member Metzger said? So if we start doing that, what kind of precedent are we going to set? We're going to say, oh, well, we'll approve it, but we'll wait till they get all this done before the permits are issued. But we never know that they've actually complied, that permits are issued, or anything further down the line. It might be a year from now when they finally issue a permit. But we want to, I think we need to make sure that we know what we're approving and things have been done correctly from the get-go.
Thank you. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would echo Member Schaefer's comments that she just provided. When an item like this comes before the full board, in my opinion, we should not be having to have this length of conversation about an item. The Zoning Board of Appeals, somewhere in this process, the wheels fell off of it, in my opinion, sitting here. And we need to do all we can to make sure this process is more refined, I think, and better managed moving forward, so that we're not taking 20 minutes of a board meeting to discuss things that should have been taken care of a long time ago through this process.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Still on round one. Member Cavallini.
I'd like to compliment Catherine Metzger for the time that she put in detecting